Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating guest. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ceris Jacobs. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts. Believe it or not, I used to live for a few years in Melbourne, Australia as well, and I am 70 years old. I just celebrated my 70th birthday last week, and I'm so happy to be in my 7th decade. Now, my story, where can I start? I was born in Singapore during British colonial times, lived under colonial rule, and was educated in a Methodist mission school in Singapore. When I finished high school, we were in the midst of a very turbulent time in Singapore because that was a time when the Americans were pulling out of Vietnam and the British Empire, who ruled us, was in bankruptcy. And so they were leaving too. And they formed the Federation of Malaysia. Singapore was part of that. And unfortunately, there was a lot of fighting and race rioting during this tumultuous time. My family left for Australia. I went with my family, was there for 2 years, and fell in love with my first husband there. And when he went to Oxford, England on a postdoc, I went to visit him for 2 weeks and stayed for the rest of my life. I never went home again. I was 19 at the time, a high school dropout, a college dropout. And so my journey towards where I am today has been a very twisted and different journey, very unlike what I ever would have imagined for myself. We traveled all over the world as homeless people, essentially itinerant, until we were lucky enough to be sponsored to the United States. And after living in many, many cities in the United States, we settled in Boston. In Boston, I was fortunate enough to be able to get into Harvard Law School and became a lawyer. So for the first 25 years after I went back to school, I practiced law as a litigator. Now, being a litigator is very against cultural type because as an ethnic Chinese woman who had been raised in Asia, we were always taught to be, how would you say, non-confrontational. And of course, being a trial lawyer, you had to learn to stand on your feet, to take the punches, so to speak. These are verbal punches, not physical ones, thank God. And also, we had to learn to be nimble on our feet in terms of cross-examination. And I went to a high-profile, very, very large Boston law firm. I was there for a while and I took a leave of absence and I became a federal prosecutor. So that was an amazing experience because I worked with law enforcement, with the FBI, with the DEA, Secret Service, the postal inspectors, and they all took one look at me because I'm quite small. I'm less than 5 foot tall. And of course, I present as a small Chinese woman. And so nobody thought that I was capable of prosecuting federal criminals, but of course I was. And I used the way I look as a disguise, as a way of disarming opponents. So a lesson which is never judge a book by its cover. After my stint, a 5-year stint as a prosecutor, I went back to private practice. But I also want to add that as an immigrant in America, I had to fight very hard to get my green card, which is my permanent residence. And when I finally was sworn in as a citizen, I was sworn in by Judge Woodlock as a U.S. citizen and as a federal prosecutor all at once, because you had to be a citizen in order to be able to prosecute fellow Americans. So for all intents and purposes, I am American. I have been an American now for many, many years. And at the age of 60, I formed a new company, and it was a huge career change in my life. At the time, I was married to my second husband, Charles, who truly was the love of my life, my soulmate, my muse, inspiration, and my great collaborator, aider, and abettor in all things crazy, adventurous, and out of the box. And together, we had adventures all over the world. But for me, I needed something that was able to consume the rest of my life, the last 1/3 of my life. And one day, Charles was celebrating a big birthday, and I decided to commission a song cycle for him, and that didn't work out. So I got up one morning, 4 a.m. in the morning. I sat at my computer, and the first draft of the script, the libretto, for a new opera called Madam Whitesnake just poured out of me. Now, for those of you who don't know the legend of the White Snake, it is one of the most beloved myths in all of East Asia. It's a transformation story about a white snake demon who yearns to become human to experience love. And after 1,000 years of praying and begging the gods, she gets her wish and she's able to transform into a beautiful woman. But of course, inside her, she's still a snake. And this is a disaster when she meets and falls in love with a human being, because when you think of today's world, if race relationships are so hard, and in fact, interracial marriages for a long time were illegal in America, can you imagine what it was like for a human being to marry a snake, a demon, to boot? So, of course, the authorities didn't like it and worked very hard to disrupt that relationship. So it ended as an all opera in tragedy. But this was a story of an extremely powerful woman and somebody who was not afraid to seize her dream, and it absolutely captured my imagination. So we started developing Madam Whitesnake together, Charles and I. When he woke up that day, I handed him the script and he said to me, "What is this?" And I said, "It's your birthday present." Then followed several years of development and hard work. And at one point he said to me, "You know, Cerise, the next time you say to me, You want to give me a birthday present? I'm going to tell you, no, thank you. We managed to get a opera company in Boston to co-produce the show with us, and it was an enormous success. Um, Unfortunately, right after it premiered, the world premiere in Boston, Charles died. It was devastating to me. I sat by his bedside. We were supposed to go to China for the Asia premiere because the co-commissioner was the Beijing Music Festival. And unfortunately, of course, Charles was dead. And a friend of mine said, "Are you going to be going to Beijing?" And I said, "Are you crazy?" And I heard Charles's voice in my head saying, "There you go again. You need to think out of the box." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'm going." So I left the hospital room. I went to the funeral home. I made funeral arrangements, jumped on a plane, flew to Beijing, got off the plane, took a shower, went to the premiere, got back on the plane, came back to Boston, and had his funeral. And that was the beginning of Whitesnake Projects, the company I then founded because of the inspiration of the Whitesnake. And I founded this company also for Charles and to do activist opera. Activist opera, which does socially relevant work. And I do want to tell you that Madam Whitesnake, our first creation, went on to win the Pulitzer Prize. So it was a wonderful, wonderful show, which Charles did not share the honor because he was not here with me, but I'm sure he knows about it wherever he is in the universe. So that is the start of Whitesnake Projects.
Oh my gosh, your story is just absolutely amazing. My condolences for your loss. It sounds to me like everything that happened in such divine timing. The fact that he lived long enough to help you create this beautiful thing and then pass away so soon. It's very, very sad. But I'm pretty sure wherever he is, he must be so proud of you in terms of what you've actually done with your life since. Your story is really quite an inspiration. So this now led on to quite a number of other creative ventures. So talk about how your multicultural background from Singapore influenced your approach to creating a new American opera and addressing social issues through your work.
Thank you, Gertrude, for this question. Yes, so being new to opera now, don't forget, most people in the classical music industry have grown up through it, and I didn't. I was an outsider because I was an attorney for most of my professional life, and it was only in the last one third of my life that I chose to have a huge career change and work in opera. I'm not a musician, but I am a writer. And so my contribution to the art form is to write, to create the stories, the lyrics, the words of an opera. And using my multicultural background, the stories I gravitate towards are, of course, multicultural and mythological, using world myth as my palette. So my stories are all original. We explore colonialism, which is, of course, something I'm very familiar with, having lived through that. We explore racism. We explore all the difficult issues of our world. We explore what it means to be an immigrant, what it means to give up everything you know and go to a new country and start again. My work explores what it means to not have enough to eat, to not, in other words, my target audience are the underrepresented majority, are the voices that are never heard, are the communities that are dismissed and ignored. And those are the voices that my company uplifts.
It's just absolutely incredible what can be done when the power of storytelling in whatever form gives a voice to those who have no voice. So, what inspired you to co fund White Snake's projects? And how did you intertwine activism and social justice themes with opera?
Well, it's actually quite simple because after I won the Pulitzer Prize, I knew I could not stop working in this field. But
Yeah.
every single door of the traditional opera companies was closed to me for a lot of reasons. One, because I had no history in this art form, and probably because of the way I look. And it occurred to me that if I ever wanted to have my voice to be heard, I would have to create my own platform. I
Yeah.
would have to create my own platform and invite others who looked just like me to join. And that's
Yes.
why I founded Whitesnake Projects as a platform for
Right.
creators and artists of color to be able to tell their stories, to create, to be produced, to be seen, to be heard. And
Yeah.
we are now in our sixth season, and we are just going from strength to strength.
So your opera, Madam Whitesnake, which won the Pulitzer Prize for music in 2011, how do you think this contributed to conversations on diversity and representation in the arts?
Well, I think that it really was an harbinger of the current revolution in American opera. At the time, there were no operas done by people of color. I believe
Mm,
when we won the Pulitzer, my partner, Zhou Long, who is a Chinese American composer,
yes.
became the first Asian American composer to win um, a Pulitzer in music for opera.
Wow.
And probably the first Asian American composer in 40 years. In other words, not limited to the field of opera. So it just
Yes.
shows you, how groundbreaking, groundbreaking this was. And since that time, we have, of course, premiered in Beijing. We've premiered at the Hong Kong Arts Festival in Hong Kong. We've toured through 4 or 5 cities in Taiwan. And I think it is recognized as the first in BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color opera creations. So it's been, I think, a big catalyst for other people of color to think that, yeah, maybe I can do this too. Because, of course,
Yes.
we never thought we couldn't do it, which was the crazy thing if you think about it. We never
Oh,
thought that we couldn't do this. We always believed that we could bring beauty in this world and that just like ordinary people could do this. You didn't have to
yes.
be specialists. And we were right.
It's just amazing. So, in your operas, you often tell these stories of communities that have been traditionally marginalized. What is your process for authentically representing these diverse narratives?
I think partnerships are extremely important, to
Yeah.
get that authenticity and not to be um, co opting somebody else's story. So let me
Yes.
give you an example. When Trump abolished DACA, now DACA is the Dream Act. That is
Yes.
legislation that allowed these children who had been brought into America when they were just young by their families to stay in America, and therefore they had no legal status, but they had the
Yes.
protection of the Dream Act, so they could go to school and be educated and go to college and not be worried about being deported. Well, Trump abolished its protections, and I was so angry that I
Mm,
called one of my partners, composer partner, Jorge Sosa. He is a Mexican American immigrant.
right.
And I said, Jorge, we have to do something about this. We have to make a statement about this.
Mm,
So what we did was we created the opera called I Am a Dreamer Who No Longer Dreams. And it is about the plight of dreamers.
wow.
The dreamer was a Mexican protagonist, and her lawyer was a Chinese, Southeast Asian Chinese attorney, like myself. So we were actually writing about ourselves, right?
Okay.
And
Yes.
it was one of the most powerful shows to ever hit the ground in Boston or anywhere because it's traveled to different cities. The
Wow.
entire audience wept. They wept because of the power of the story and because they saw themselves reflected in it.
The story. Yes. Wow. So, civic practice in arts administration. Let's talk about that a little bit. Can you discuss how Whitesnake Projects integrates civic practice in its artistic work and the impact it's had on both the arts community and the wider society?
Absolutely. Civic practice is one of the pillars of our work. One, of course,
Mhm.
the first is, of course, high production values and artistry. And then we've got civic practice as another one, another
Right.
main pillar. And they both stand shoulder to shoulder. So, what we try to do is to involve our community in collaborative art making. So we have a lot
Okay.
of shows where we solicit community input. For instance, I launched this amazing concert series called Sing Out Strong. And
Okay.
Sing Out Strong takes its theme every year from an issue we are exploring. So, for instance, 2024 is the dreaded general election year, as we all know here in America. And so, our theme for our programming this year is voting as freedom. And so, Sing Out Strong, the theme is Sing Out Strong, Emancipated Voices. And we ask ordinary, regular people in our community, they could be students, housewives, cleaners,
Mm,
cooks, to write lyrics about what voting means to them, about the concept of democracy and freedom. Then we take
yes.
the lyrics, we commission professional composers to set those lyrics to music and make songs.
Right.
And then these songs tour our neighborhoods. So
Okay.
that's how we involve our community in art making with us. So they get to create the work and then they get to see the finished product in their
Yeah.
neighborhoods.
So, what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in bringing diverse, socially conscious operas to the stage, and how have you overcome them?
So initially, people weren't used to hearing diverse voices, and so they never considered us to be doing really opera, even though we were, because all our musicians are classically trained. Our voices that we use are classically trained opera singers, and so on and so forth. I do want to be honest about it. It was very difficult to get credibility in the beginning. The
Yes.
gatekeepers are mostly white and they do
Mm,
not understand diverse voices. I mean, one of the people on my writing as, oh, well, Cerise, Cerise Jacobs does not write in vernacular American. Of course course I don't. I mean, I speak perfect English, but maybe not vernacular
Yes.
American English.
Exactly.
Um, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but then something happened, okay? We got to the pandemic and
Yes.
George Floyd was murdered. And it
That
was
was
the most horrific murder captured by
John.
a by a yeah, it was just broadcast worldwide. And that just totally pricked the conscience of everybody. And all of a
Society.
sudden, all of a sudden, social justice became popular again.
Yeah.
Of course, for us, we have been all about social justice. We never had to jump on any bandwagon, you know. So it
Yes.
was an astonishing phenomena to see all these performing arts organizations jump on that bandwagon, and for us to suddenly realize that we were no longer considered fringe, that we were, in fact,
Yes. You're now mainstream.
mainstream. I know. That was scary. That was scary to
Amazing.
be viewed as mainstream.
Wow. Wow. And it actually makes George Floyd's death worthwhile that he didn't die in vain. His death was a catalyst for a lot of change in the United States. I was talking to a friend the other day about my view, my perception of the US, because I was in the United States during the Obama um, reign, and I was there when everything transitioned and left in 2017. And I was living in Albuquerque, and I saw the horrendousness of what was going on in the society. But for me, I felt like somebody had pulled off a band-aid over a septic sore of America's wounds. So everybody thought that everything was addressed during the civil rights movement. Racism doesn't exist. There's equality in the US. But underneath the surface of the society, this wound is festering, has pus, and somebody pulled off the band-aid. And it all came out. And now the society has to address this wound. People have to face these issues of racism that are there. They are there, they're subtle. So sometimes these incidents happen to bring about change that is needed in society.
Yeah. Yes, sometimes it takes a huge tragedy to catalyze, and rejuvenate a movement. And I think that we are now all catalyzed and rejuvenated, and we continue to do this work because it is so important. Our main stage show this fall in September, the composer is an 85-year-old Black woman composer, and her piece is called Is This America? And it's about the life and legacy of Fannie Lou Hamer, who is a Black woman activist in
Yes.
Mississippi during the 1960s, and she galvanized the Black vote. So, thematically, it fits into this election year because, of course,
Yes.
so many obstacles now have been placed in the path of um, our communities of color being able to vote freely. And of course, that
Yes.
was what Fannie Lou Hamer had been fighting all her life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we
That's
try to do
right.
timely, relevant work.
Yes. Yes. That really addresses what's going on in the society. So my last question for you is, what advice would you give to aspiring arts administrators and creators who wish to incorporate diversity and social justice in their work?
Well, I think you have to believe in it deep down in your heart, because if it's only a surface thing, that if you're not passionate and these values don't live inside you, it's not
Yeah.
possible to stay the course, because it's not easy. This work is not easy. I don't pretend that it is. And it's sometimes extremely hurtful and unrewarding. So you've got
Yes.
to really believe, you really got to embrace these values in order that you keep persisting. And also, of course, the other thing that I would say is that the world is changing. Change is slow, but it is. And
It is.
therefore,
Yeah.
you should stay with it.
I could talk to you forever. I definitely want to reconnect with you and have a deeper conversation at some point. Thank you so much for coming onto our platform today, sharing your amazing story. Please keep doing the work. Know that you are supported right here from Melbourne, Australia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Gertrude.
And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is attracting some phenomenal women, women who are movers and shakers in their fields, who share their stories to uplift, inspire, and energize you. So, what are you doing with your life? What difference are you going to make in the world before you die? Tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.